Gentlemen, boys and girls, comrades and compañeros, welcome to the Moynihan Report. We're doing I warned you last week that we'd be doing a couple of interviews this week, sort of longer form, interesting interviews, and extremely excited about another one where the person sitting across from me is far more accomplished than I am, and I cannot go through your exhaustive resume. But Meredith Whittaker is the CEO of Signal, president of Signal. See, I don't even, that's how dumb I am. That difference doesn't even make sense to me.
Yeah.
You
Executive title roulette.
Yeah, you run Signal. You were at NYU, right? You're the AI Institute there. We were talking before we started about a lot of the negative coverage that you see of AI, a lot of the sort of doom and gloom, jobs are going away. And I just wanted to start with, I find a lot of positive in it. I use AI for a variety of things. It's taken me a long time to figure out how to appropriately use it and get good things out of it. But what would you say if somebody came to you and said, well, this is a cataclysmic technology that's going to destroy the Earth? Give me a positive reading on AI. And we can get to the negative stuff, which you have a lot of that too, I'm sure.
I mean, I'm gonna slice this question a bit because and just rewind it, right? Like, AI is not a technical term of art.
Yeah. AI
is an aspiration. It's a marketing term.
It's meant a lot of things over time, right?
It has meant a lot of things over time. Yeah. I'll give my little potted history here. In 1957, cognitive and computer scientist John McCarthy invented the term for two reasons, and he admits this in subsequent interviews. One, he wanted grant money, and the mid-century U.S. government was giving out a lot of money because technological supremacy was one way to expand the U.S. empire, et cetera, et cetera. And he wanted to exclude his rival Norbert Wiener from the convening he was looking for grant money for. And Norbert Wiener had coined the term cybernetics, and he was like, well, if I use cybernetics, I'm Norbert's disciple. If I use AI, this is my thing, I can cook, right? Yeah. But at the time, McCarthy's version of AI meant, something called kind of the symbolic approach, symbolic systems, which was directly opposed to the deep learning approach, which McCullough and Pitts had sort of, created or sort of offered in the early 40s. And so I offer that like tiny little perhaps sidebar of an explanation. Like, this term has meant many, 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 many things. Now, right now, what we're talking about when we talk about AI is this deep learning centric approach, sort of built on the neural approach that McCullough and Pitts proposed. It's gone in and out of fashion, largely because it is dependent on huge amounts of computational infrastructure. So this is the NVIDIA, this is the massive, trillions, the cajillions. We're making up numbers that sound like children invented them now. The infrastructure investments that are happening, and massive amounts of data, which sort of comes out of a very particular business model that emerged when the internet was commercialized in the 1990s. Yeah. So my positive spin, and you may or may not like this is not the only approach to AI. This massive, centralized, big data centric deep learning approach, which can do some things. It like spits out interesting prompts. It gestures at approximate answers that may or may not be correct. It can find patterns in large amounts of data, and if that data is meaningful and your distribution matches the context you want to get answers about, those patterns could be very meaningful. But it's not the only way to do AI. And I think as we hit some of these thresholds, the energy use, you hit the issue of integrating these into sensitive systems where you need precise answers, not sort of approximate answers created by a predictive system, et cetera, we're going to see more attention to the many other approaches to creating systems that, behave in one way or another, or at least we perceive they behave in intelligent or human-like ways. So
when people, the AI Institute, and you write and talk about this stuff, I like to sort of look at it from, the viewer or listener's perspective, who, maybe uses ChatGPT but doesn't know much more about it than that, Gemini, et cetera. And there is a sense amongst people, like, my mother, for instance, would be like, well, it's going to kill all the jobs, isn't it? And I interviewed, I like almost everybody that I interview, with one exception, and I'm never shy about saying
names.
Sam Altman, who I think is a loathsome person for a lot of reasons, just a real dick to me too. Wow. No, it's on my Instagram. I posted videos of it. He's just such an asshole. But the entire interview,
Sam, shape up.
Yeah, well, the entire interview, and this was like 2018 or 19, was about how he was in favor of UBI. Because the technology he was creating.
Oh, yeah. It's like Hayek's welfare.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is what it is. It's like, I mean, this is Austrian school welfare.
Yeah.
And he was like, it's going to destroy. I mean, this is the guy who's running OpenAI sitting across from you telling me, oh, the thing that I've created is going to be so disruptive, we're just going to have to pay people because their jobs will be eliminated by the technology that I've created, which was an interesting conversation. What do you make of that kind of vision of the future, that AI is going to replace so many jobs that there are going to be indigent people on the dole because all the stuff that they did previously can be done by computers?
That is a tangled nexus.
Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry.
I like, because I want to approach a couple of different kind of claims and things that are going on.
The one that Sam Altman's an asshole.
Yeah. No comment on that at this moment. But on the, first, if you look at sort of the history of computer technology, and I've actually done primary research on this, it tracks back to desires for rationalization and labor control. Like, Charles Babbage very admittedly created the archetypes for his analytical engine, which became the blueprints for classical computation, basically the template for what computers were up to the 70s with like punch cards, etc.
In an imperial way,
He wanted to rationalize, to control, to standardize mathematical labor. And he was using techniques that were taken from sort of, systems of factory management and worker surveillance, etc., to do that. So, like, interesting tidbit, but you can sort of pull a lot of that through history and realize, like, kind of the desire to not necessarily eliminate, but to control and degrade work in a certain way, whether it be the sort of assembly line speed ups where you're asking the same individual to do work, more work faster because you have a machine that is now sort of calibrating the pace of labor, up to the sort of, kind of hyper specialization that means no worker owns their skills in a way that they actually have leverage. So they're just sort of pushing a button or logging into an app in a way that they can't sort of demand a wage for. There's a whole history here that predates this modern deep learning, large scale AI approach. And I think, what you get when you look at that, you broaden the aperture and look at that full picture, is a recognition of sort of what I would call the asymmetry between those who are actually the users of AI and the subjects of AI, the people on whom it's used. So we can all pick up ChatGPT or Perplexity and do our little consumer app stuff, but that's not really the market. That's not where the revenue is coming from. Yeah. We can almost see ChatGPT, it's a free consumer version. That's an advertisement for, services and, kind of features that then can be used by those who are invested in things like... So
explain to people where the revenue is coming from. I know I pay $30 a month because I find it useful, but,
there's revenue. There's a lot of revenue.
Yeah.
We aren't seeing profit yet. We are not seeing break even.
Where's the revenue coming from?
Where's the revenue
for beyond subscriptions? Is there
contracts, licensing, APIs to third parties?
Yeah.
So GPT, I don't have a number here, and I think it'd be great for us to get an audit of this. But if you look at the AI startup industry, the large majority of the things we're calling AI startups are white labeling an API for GPT. So they sign a contract with Microsoft, which that OpenAI is sort of a part of Microsoft for all intents and purposes, to use their compute infrastructure, their Azure.
Yeah, for people who don't know that, the API is the brain that you're kind of,
It's like the plug.
The plug, exactly.
The socket you plug something into that then,
when it's created by OpenAI or Microsoft or something. Yeah.
So like basically they are white labeling, like reskinning what OpenAI has created for a given market or what have you. But they're, barnacles on the hull of the big AI player's ship. Yeah. They are not independent actors sort of being kind of market challengers there. And that's an important distinction. So it's, this is why the push for massive government contracts. This is why the debt structuring is so weird, because it's kind of circular, because they haven't really found that killer consumer app. So it's, there's a question of like, where does break even come from for an industry where the capex is so exceptional?
Yeah.
And what we're doing is investing in a highly depreciable asset like these, servers and chips that themselves are sort of updated, every year or two in ways that mean, we've seen data center build outs that are stopped mid build out. The plans are raised, the construction is torn down because they realize, that architecture for the data center isn't gonna, it doesn't support the new H100s. It doesn't support the new breed of chips. And we'll have to put in new cooling systems. We'll have to put in a new architecture for this building to do that. So let's just tear it down and build something else.
But you look at this stuff from not a political perspective, but just from, the administration's dealing with China and tariffs. And you read into these stories, and if you just have a sort of broad knowledge of this, you say, there's a big negotiation about access to NVIDIA chips. And just in the sense that this is not, this is interesting. There's the AI technology, and we kind of get it. It pervades almost every aspect of foreign policy, of domestic policy, in a way that in the first kind of, dot-com boom in the 90s, where all these junk companies are getting tons of venture money. And it's like, what does this all mean? I mean, that was a very separate thing, whereas now the integration of all this stuff with governments and with policy, I'm only realizing this, and this is my job, in the past couple of years, of how important this stuff is in almost everything we do, as when it comes to governing and when it comes to foreign policy and tariffs and all this stuff. That's a big shift in a very short period of time.
It is. I think you do have a legacy we're still living from the 90s, in which the Clinton administration was very clear about its motivations for privatizing network computation, for sort of creating the internet industry
in a sort of regulatory way.
In a regulatory way, right? And sort of economically, right? So they were coming off the backs of stagflation. They needed, an economic miracle, privatizing the internet and sort of reaping the economic gains of turning that infrastructure, sort of, the pipes and the protocols and everything over to industry was, meant to solve that economic hardship without redistribution, right? So there's a sort of tagline from that time, it's the New Deal without the socialism. And there was a very clear motivation within that sort of played out around the crypto wars and some of these other debates around technological standards and who should be able to deploy and access tech, basically to ensure that the U.S. was the center of the tech industry by exporting its networks, exporting its standard, exporting its sort of internet companies and their reach beyond the U.S. using soft power and other sort of mechanisms to do that. So there has been an understanding, that predates the internet, back to the telephone, back, to the post office, that communication networks are inherently centralizing. They're sort of natural monopolies, right? You have to have one standard, they have to work together, and ultimately that's a sort of central node of control. I think we built up the internet, industry with the U.S. as the center of gravity, China having, experienced this century of humiliation and kind of having a large enough internal market was like, no way, you're not sort of getting a toehold here. So you have two poles geopolitically of, the internet industry, the platform industry, the infrastructure industry on which the entire AI industry is built. And that's the US with their hyperscalers. And then that's, to a lesser degree, China. And if you look at what these same companies, these big tech companies provide, they're incredibly meaningful from a sort of soft power or even hard power geopolitical perspective. So you have the infrastructure that everything runs on, the servers, the clouds. And 3 U.S. companies have about 70% of the global market. That's Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And then there's sort of China sort of competing.
And we see what happens when the Amazon cloud goes down for half a day.
I mean, you can like liken that to an on-off switch.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
I mean, it
boom.
was hard for me. I had things that I was trying to do that I couldn't do that day because the cloud went
And
down.
that's like the service, but that's
Yeah.
also our governments. That's our core
Yeah.
infrastructure. That's, you know, a really staggeringly profound choke point, you know,
Yeah.
single point of failure. Then you have, built on top of that is our information environments. So these are the platforms. This is, you know, the social media, right? YouTube, Instagram, but also things like Google search, right? The, you know, like what creates the shared reality that we swim in. You know, obviously, since time immemorial, like states and those in power want to control that type of information. So these are, you know, these are assets. And then on top of that, I would characterize AI and these sort of like these large scale models and the APIs that are being licensed and the government contracts for use of AI as, you know, effectively our decision making capabilities. So, you know, you sign a big shiny contract with Google, you integrate Gemini into your sort of workflow at your corporation, but ultimately what you're doing is ceding decision making authority to a company that can change that algorithm at any point.
Let me ask you a question about that. Yeah, no, and it's also, we're at that stage now where people are including AI in things that don't need it. We've
been at that stage.
I mean, I'm just noticing, keep in mind, I'm always saying, I'm just noticing this stuff now. You've noticed this for years.
I call it verbose clippy. It's like everywhere. I'm just like, get out. I just need to send no as a response. I don't need to.
I love when these things get into the media environment. I was filming something in Russia with Vitalik Buterin, the guy who created Ethereum. And we're walking through a factory. This shows you how engaged I am. I use fiat currency. And we were walking through a cable factory in Russia. And Vitalik speaks Russian, and they're going back and forth. And I said, Vitalik, what are you talking about? And he's a very odd guy. And he said, well, he's talking about how he needs the blockchain for blah, blah, blah. But I don't have the heart to tell him that he just needs a spreadsheet. And I was like, everyone's blockchain. And that was for it. Now it's AI, and that stuff is everywhere. But to the point about private control of this stuff, it's very important for your company that governments do not have the keys and cannot see us. And it's like Signal is the kind of gold standard for this stuff. But when it comes to, you know, Amazon Cloud goes offline and it makes our life very difficult. The alternative would be what? Because, I mean, we don't want the government controlling these things at all, right?
Well, I mean, I think that is a pretty profound question, and I agree with you, right? Like, I am wary of the type of centralized control, particularly the type of, you know, control that has resources like our entire infrastructures, all of our intimate data at their hands, right? Like, whether it be corporate or government, that's sort of, you know, that's my reflexive politics. And I think it's, you know, and these infrastructure, you know, you don't want 18 telephones on your wall. Each one, you have to remember which group of friends to, you know, like it's like, you know, you have iMessage, you have Signal, which of course is your primary messenger.
Of course.
You have, you know, like it's already annoying. And so, you know, again, communication networks, these types of, you know, networks are centralizing inherently via the need for interoperable standards and some sort of, you know, way of, you know, making them all work together. I think, you know, the question then is a question of governance, a question of transparency, a question of, you know, what are the norms for decision making around how these things operate and how they are maintained, and what is the objective function that is sort of calibrating the actions and decisions of those who ultimately control that. And right now there, you know, a handful of US companies that sort of like swing in the wind, you know, one administration, they go one way, the next administration, they go the other way.
It's amazing.
I worked at Google 2006 to 2019, so I saw the Obama elections. I saw that, you know, like you gut your policy shop, you hire in the people who are, you know, like as close as possible to the new administration. Hopefully they're like dating them or something. So that you've got all that, you know, you sort of, you know, refresh your messaging to sort of appeal to those impact. Like, and why are they doing that? It's really simple, because ultimately their goal at the end of the day is growth in revenue and, you know, other metrics forever indefinitely.
Maybe I'm framing it wrong because it's a really interesting point that in 2014, I was working at Newsweek Daily. I remember pitching to Tina Brown a story because I had gone to see a friend on the Google campus, and he was running the policy shop, Swedish guy.
Oh, Nicholas?
Yeah. Great guy. One of the smartest guys I've ever met.
I think, like, I
yeah.
No, it's I'm not going to say it, but
you can tell that.
Very smart.
I will say incredibly
the smartest neoliberal I know.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. And for you, neoliberal's not. It's fine. Yeah. She thinks it's bad because she went to Berkeley. But no, it's
no. I think it's bad because I don't think capital flight should be able to discipline democratic governance. But anyway,
that's the last half of the show. Yeah. But it was. I was saying, to her, I was like, they have a State Department. The stuff is happening when it came to, this Innocence of Muslims film that was blamed, the stuff that happened in Benghazi. The government is interfacing all day with Google, with their own, and you would say this to the Google people, and then, not Nicholas, by the way, and then wink and say, we don't say that we have a State Department, that we interface in that way. But I'm framing this to you as there's private companies, and then there's government. Mm-hmm. We're kind of at a point where those have merged in a lot of ways, right? I
think Citizens United kind of structurally merged them in a way that can't be
ignored,
irrespective of how sophisticated the lobbying arm and the government.
But it's in a tech way of like the data, the stuff that the government doesn't have the capability because they can't get the goddamn DMV website to work in this city. That the interfacing with tech companies is, you have this thing with Elon Musk buying Twitter, and then the Twitter files, and then this kind of sensationalized kind of thing. It's like, is anyone like
that flop sweat failure?
Yeah, it's just like, is that interaction of government and private companies has been going on for a long time, but it's really, really significant now. Am I wrong? Because this stuff and I don't.
I don't think. I think there's more attention to it because the geopolitical significance of the type of control these companies have globally can't be ignored.
Yeah.
It is not like Snowden proved this is not new. That was the government, and if you go back to, the crypto wars describes this debate that went on through the 1990s that sort of, kind of tracked alongside the effort to the moves that were made to commercialize the internet.
Yeah.
And it was basically encryption is the technology we have to protect privacy and authenticate people online, to ensure transactions can happen, right? It's, this complicated math. It's very precious. And the debate, before the end of the 90s, it was classified as munitions. And in order to create strong crypto and deploy it, you had to get permission from the State Department. You couldn't export it. It was this whole pain in the ass, right? And it was
an export license was yeah.
And so there was this debate that was basically like, okay, we can't actually commercialize the internet if transactions can't happen, if confidential information can't be sent. And then this is the sort of intelligence agencies and others are like, but you can't have regular people having privacy from us. We need interception points. We need to be able to undermine, the privacy of communications to, it's always the pretext, get the terrorists, get the bad guys. It's always
the ticking time bomb scenario and things like that.
And so this is playing out between kind of the
Wait, is that still playing out with you though?
It plays out every fucking day. It's a
seriously
freaking day. It's like the and we'll get into that, but let me walk you through this historical thing because I think it's actually important to sort of pin down what we're talking about. Basically there's an acknowledgement we need encryption because we can't reap the benefits of this without it. We need to be able to export it because
no one's buying that stuff if there's
we can't have the U.S. as the center of power of the tech if we can't export encryption and have people adopt our standards. No one's going to buy software from a U.S. company that has a backdoor for a foreign government, full stop. And then how do we adulterate it? And there's this sort of thing that plays out that's still playing out, really, this kind of magical thinking around we'll just get a golden key for the good guys, and obviously that's not possible. But what you see at the end of the 90s, and Karina Ryder is actually the person who's done really good work on this, is basically it was okay, this is the detente we reached. We're going to liberalize encryption. Anyone can make encryption. Anyone can ship encryption. You don't need permission. Basically the Signal protocol is a example of liberalized encryption. Just, two virtuosic cryptographers wrote it, published it, used it. It's the gold standard. Mm-hmm. But a recognition that we're also going to endorse a business model that relies on surveillance, this sort of advertising business model where it's like collect all the data in the hands of private companies. There's no restrictions on privacy. And because you're doing advertising, you want to know your customers. So you're gathering more and more and more data. That's sort of set in stone the business model, this surveillance business model we're in now. The government recognizing like, we don't have to have a public fight about this. We can just come around the back door, get data that we would not have permission to collect as government because there's sort of laws around that from private companies. And, we're all okay. We reap the benefits. We get the data. We don't have to sort of look like fools debating the nuances of encryption in the public.
Yeah.
And so, I think it was Snowden that really sort of blew up the collateral consequences of those relationships, which is a long, but I hope interesting enough way of saying, like, I don't think
Absolutely,
this is new.
yeah.
I think what we're seeing is the dependencies on a handful of U.S.-based and less prominently Chinese-based hyperscalers who have monopoly controls, economies of scale where you can't really just spin up a competitor, are now clear enough that the geopolitical consequences of that can't be ignored.
When you ask the average person that, it's always that, I don't care what they see. I don't have anything to hide. That is the most common.
I do. I've heard the average person give that line a handful of times.
Yeah, a handful of times. I have plenty to hide, so please don't hack me. But
I don't have the time for
it. Look, for most people, the trade-off is great. I have free services all over the place. I watch an ad. I give them my information. I don't have anything to hide from anyone. I get free Gmail. I get, I can watch movies on YouTube for the cost of a 45-second ad. Pretty good. You guys are out there talking about privacy all the time. Who gives a shit? I've got nothing to hide. This is a good deal for me. What do you say to people who say that?
I mean, I have a little exercise I will do sometimes, which is, close your eyes.
Mm-hmm. Really? Me?
Yeah, do it.
Are you like a mentalist now? I got to close my eyes. Okay.
You'll wake up hypnotized. Okay. You won't know.
Okay. Eyes are closed.
Eyes are closed. And, get in your body. Think about this.
Okay.
Every text message you've ever sent, every email you've ever sent, every Grindr message you've ever sent.
What are you implying?
I'm Hinge, whatever. All of it.
I didn't do any of that.
I'm implying nothing. I'm saying all of it. All of it is now on a database. Someone put it, they found it, they put it on a database. That ill-advised text you sent your friend about the thing, the shitty little comment you made your girlfriend, the weird flirt you did that you then regretted.
Well, my girlfriend will be very upset when she sees the Grindr messages, but continue.
But she's going to see it because this is all on a database.
Yeah.
And it is... You're sitting in a room, right? And there's a person there who's like, hey, we put it in a database and we're going to send the link to that database. It's searchable. It's summarized by AI. It's really elegant. You can find anything. We're going to send it to your employer. We're going to send it to your entire family. That's, your in-laws, your cousins, everyone. We're going to send it to your church, to your pastor. We're going to send it to your pickleball league. I don't know. All of them. Your best friend, your high school. Everyone is going to get a link to this database where they can immediately Control F and find their name. They can go through everything you've ever said. How many of your relationships would survive that? And what would you do to prevent that?
Okay, can I open my eyes now?
So you do care.
Yeah, okay.
You do care, my friend. QED.
Yeah, I just want you to know that the eye closing thing was useful. I think they're coming for me now because of what I was thinking.
Sorry about the cortisol, but it does work,
my
right?
God,
yeah.
it works. And I was thinking about, I narrowed it to what I had texted today. And I'm like, I think I'm fucked just from today.
I know. Well, there you are.
It's bad because... it's funny because there was a story this morning, an Epstein story in the New York Times about these messages between Epstein.
Oh my God, imagine.
No, and it's just I don't know, because there was one message that I was texting a friend of mine and said, who's also a journalist, and I said, I don't really know what this means contextually. And it didn't make a ton of sense. And I think of every text that I've sent that I'd need to explain the context of and why it sounds so terrible. Oh my God. Yeah, that's everyone. And look, I mean, there are people that have an old video of them when they were 15 years old.
Yeah.
You know, rapping along to a song and saying words that you probably shouldn't say on video, and losing jobs, losing college placement for this, losing professional sports.
I mean,
this has happened a lot.
Let's
That's
ratchet
public
it
too.
up. There's a woman who went to prison because Meta turned over Facebook DMs between her and her daughter in the state of Nebraska post Dobbs that showed her helping her daughter get reproductive care and deal with the aftermath. Mm-hmm. That was the primary piece of evidence that was used to, you know, put her name's Jessica.
Yeah.
She's like cold. You know, like, I don't know, you know, like her life now, you know, she has a criminal record. She can't get a job. She can't get SNAP, if anyone can still get SNAP. Like, it's, you know, that's a tiny example of what we are seeding when we seed this. And the fact that, you know, data remains, right? They have the data unless they flush it. But, you know, ultimately, we have to assume that's in their hands.
Well, tell people
forever.
about Signal in that context. I mean, there's some people that might know it from Jeff Goldberg and Pete Hegseth only. But if that communication took place on your platform, would the same result have happened?
Well, let's play that out. So what happened is, you know, Meta receives a subpoena. They fight it. They don't fight it. But, you know, they usually fight it. They're not trying to give their customers data. But ultimately, like, their jurisdiction in the U.S. and they have to comply with the laws of the land. Yeah. And at some point, the ratchet turns. They have the data. They have to give it up. Mm-hmm. Signal gets a subpoena. We work with our lawyers. We say we can't give it up. You can ratchet up all you want. You could put a gun to Meredith Whittaker's head and say, give me that. I cannot give it to anyone because I don't have it. Because the way Signal is built is that only the people involved in that communication, only Jessica and her daughter in this case, would have the keys to unlock those messages. And those are in their hands, not in Signal's. And we have built it such that we collect as close to zero data as possible so that you don't have to trust me. You don't have to like me. As close to,
but you have to do, there's some just basic data collection. What is that?
We have access to phone numbers, which are used to sign up and kind of as an authentication mechanism. Mm-hmm. We can say, you know, yes, this phone number is attached to a Signal account. This is the time that Signal account was created, the time and day, and this is the last time they logged in. That's very, very minimal. And we have to go above and beyond for this, right? Because
but you couldn't, in my Signal account, you couldn't tell a court who was subpoenaed trying to locate where I was in a particular time. There's no GPS data.
There's nothing like that. And we have to rewrite core libraries. We have to rewrite normative ways of doing things because the entire assumption of the tech industry, sort of, you know, before the 90s, but definitely starting in the 90s when, you know, like the kind of commercialization around the data collection and the surveillance business model was instantiated, is that everyone, of course, wants to collect as much data as possible. And that's just the norm. You know, you're pinging a server, you're giving them a ton of data. We end up, you know, taking months to do what would take a couple days to do because we're having to basically re-engineer it so that we cannot collect the data, so that we are not collecting the data, so we are not sharing any data with any third party. And all of this is open source. So, you know, again, don't have to take my word for it. You can look at our repos. You can, you know, and many, many do, because there's a high incentive in the industry for sort of finding flaws with Signal. It's, you know, critical infrastructure on which, you know, high stakes communication globally relies. And so we have like a, you know, it's like white blood cells in the like hacker and InfoSec community constantly looking at our code.
Does that worry you in some ways or keep you up at night?
I love it. I love it.
Like
Thank
this kind
you.
of
keep looking, boys.
Yeah, but like
and
the kind of white hats that are looking for these things will tell you about it. I mean, these kind of 0-day exploits, if the bad guys find them and are reading people's communications and your platform, is that something you worry about, or you have? I presume you have incredible confidence in the code itself, and that
I don't take our responsibility at Signal lightly. Like it's you know, like there's a, you know, it's life or death. Militaries, governments, human rights workers, dissidents, like anyone who has something serious to say is probably using Signal, and will, you know, there's a reason going for the comms networks is sort of the first move in a military siege, right?
Yes, always.
It's imperative.
Yes.
And so when you ask, like, are you confident? Like, we have set it up structurally so that we can be as confident as possible. And every day I'm like, I think about it. It's a heavy responsibility. What I can say is we have no evidence of any major vulnerability, and we know the best people in the world are highly incentivized to look at our code. To a lot of people rely on Signal. It's the only mass network for truly private comms, and so
when somebody says WhatsApp is encrypted, iMessage is encrypted.
Well, WhatsApp, you can think of it as like, what percentage of encryption are they using, right? Mm-hmm. Like, is this 100% gold, or is this 50% gold mixed with 50% brass, or whatever alloy? And in WhatsApp case, they use our protocol, the Signal protocol, which is the gold standard.
They do.
They license it from us, and they use it to encrypt the contents of your messages. So what you and I are saying to each other. Yeah. Except in some WhatsApp for Business cases, which is, but they don't encrypt the metadata. And the metadata is like a fancy little term, but it's actually hugely intimate, right? You're talking about who you're talking to, when you talk to them, who's in your groups, your profile photo. When did you start talking to a therapist? When did you start talking to an oncologist? When did
15.
You join this, like, I don't know, the, Moynihan Report Antifa Warriors group, or whatever it is, right? All of that.
We're blowing things up. We're blowing up pipelines.
Right. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
And then of course they're owned by Meta, so you can join that data, or theoretically could join all of that metadata with profiles that are in the hands of this.
Is that why they don't do it?
Is that why they don't do it? I mean, I can't speak
speculation.
For them.
I know.
It's
this is not.
I'm sure they get a lot of pressure from law enforcement to turn over, metadata. Ad targeting would probably rely on metadata, and they are introducing ads into WhatsApp. They're also introducing AI systems, which, like knock, knock, what is AI? It relies on data. It is ultimately kind of a surveillance derivative, if we look at this in terms of, needing data inputs, prompts or information about you or what have you, and requiring huge amounts of data for training. So these are all sort of, I'm not giving the reason.
Sure,
I'm saying like all of those are factors I would consider in understanding the choices they're making.
And your company is a nonprofit for a variety of reasons. But just to go back to that for 1 second, I mean, has there ever been an example in the past? I mean, obviously, Signal gets stronger by the day with every iteration of code, where a dissident or somebody in a situation that relied upon Signal, it had been compromised by a foreign government.
We have never seen a Signal compromise. So, there's a core vulnerability that has allowed people to unwind our encryption. We have seen, the issue that we are concerned about and continue pushing on with partners like Citizen Lab at University of Toronto and others who look at targeted spyware is, targeted spyware,
Pegasus, things like that.
Pegasus, which is, Signal runs on your operating system on your device, and Signal itself is secure and private. Absolutely no evidence of any compromises that we've seen to Signal. But if they can infiltrate your device, if they can compromise your operating system, your iOS or your Android, it's game over, because of course, they can open your Spotify, they can look at your Gmail, and of course they can, on the same terms you do, open your Signal account. And so we, think the targeted spyware industry is kind of a cancer in the industry. It is it is also structurally sort of incentivizing the kind of leaving vulnerabilities in the operating system unpatched that can also be exploited by other bad actors. And so that's a concern that we have, but we have seen no evidence of a core.
Yeah, I mean, because you essentially, the greatest vulnerability is somebody looking over your shoulder, right? I mean, if you're doing something like that and someone's on a communication, I mean, that you can't prevent. But when you say that,
use a screen protector. Come on.
But when you say these bad actors, and it's funny because I mean, you think about these. The political argument has always been like, you don't want encryption because then the bad guys have it. And, and as you've said in the past, if the bad guys don't have it, nobody has it, which is itself a huge problem. But these people, I mean, whether they're veterans of Unit 8200 or whatever they are, and they go out in the private market, this stuff is out there. They know how to do it. How do you control that? Because they are a cancer. I mean, you see the Saudis using this and all the bad actors just hiring these people who are just really smart and know how to. It is a thing to worry about. Is there any way of controlling that stuff? I guess it would be regulating it or something. But the bad actors, Saudis don't give a shit about regulation, right?
I mean, I think like there was a lot of progress on this, on pushing back on the targeted spyware industry, kind of recognizing that it was, generally harmful. There was some stuff done under Biden. I think there's now, some renewed U.S. government contracts. I don't have a elegant answer. I think there is like many things right now, it's like at some point we kind of have to wake up to the real world and the nuances there and sort of, say like, this is not okay, this is okay. But it's also a market. And, there is a sort of for me, but not for thee dynamic to this entire debate where governments will be like, yes, we want to ban it, but can we get a little piece of it? And so, I think there's, what Poland did after some of the targeted hacks there is very interesting and kind of like a, in the model of kind of a truth and reconciliation approach. But nonetheless, this is big business. And I don't, I think it is helpful when companies, the big gatekeeper companies like Apple or Google with Android sort of take a stand around this. I know WhatsApp has sued some of these companies to around sort of breaches of user data, which is great. And this is where like they kind of stand out because they do take stands like that. And it's
are they generally on the side of good? I mean, I know it's hard for all the political reasons and the difficulties surrounding regulation and having to please whoever's in power. But if you were to say, like, you look at Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, the big players, did they generally have their users kind of privacy in mind or not? Because it doesn't seem like they do.
I just don't think we can't generalize on that. Like, WhatsApp has taken some good stands. They will defend encryption alongside us, and they, will have taken stands against the targeted spyware industry. Both of those things are good. Yeah. Like, does it net out to some like
that's what I'm asking. Does it net out in a positive way?
I don't think there's like it's not these things aren't fungible to the point where we can actually make that call. But like those two things, very good. Like appreciate Will and the team for leading that at WhatsApp. Amen. Yeah. But there are some other things where I think they could do a lot better.
I'll ask you one final thing, because you talked about having a bank of 18 phones on your wall, which is kind of how I feel. I use Signal.
Great.
I find it hard to get other people to, though. How do we get, I mean, it's really, because that analogy is the right one. It's like, okay, I need to call you on your Minitel or something. It's like, how do I get people away from it? It used to be the sense somebody gave me WhatsApp, I was like, oh, you're European.
No, totally.
And now it's kind of flattened, and a lot of Americans use it, and that seems to be the dominant one, despite its ridiculous name and the fact that it's owned by Meta. But how do you deal with that problem of growing a user base when the user base requires somebody else to grow with it, right? Yeah.
I mean, that is the key question, right? That's just, one of the key reasons that communication networks are sort of considered natural monopolies. Because you don't want more than one of them because it's a fucking pain in the ass. Yeah. And because ultimately, like, they're not about the network. They're about talking to your friends. They're about human relationships. Like, communication tracks to human relationships. It doesn't, it's not about having a puritanical stance vis-a-vis the app you use. If your mom and your brother and, your babysitter aren't going to use that app, you can't use it either. Yeah. And so I think it's, in Signal's case, that we have a kind of theory of change here where it's like there are exogenous factors that make people aware of their deep need for privacy or their preference for it, and kind of lead to waves of people joining all at once, which is really the only way to make it useful.
Did you get an uptick after the scandal?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, name recognition, and everyone's like, oh, well, turns out.
But it's about data being leaked, which is hilarious, I mean,
that was about men's thumbs.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't take responsibility for that. But
she said men's thumbs, by the way. Yeah.
yeah, it's 2 words. But like those,
Yeah.
back to the sort of schema I'm going to present around sort of like how do you get people to join. I think those exogenous factors generally take the form of something like political instability. So the regime changes and they're all like, oh, fuck, we're, our normal conversation is now potentially criminalized or dangerous, and we don't want to do that. So we'll see people, during protests or during unease, join Signal. And then it's like what we call kind of like big tech screw ups. So in 2021, WhatsApp changed tried to change their terms of service to share data with Meta. Everyone was like, hell no. We saw a massive spike in Signal use, knocked over our servers for a second, and then we recovered. And then we have, what I would characterize as sort of like top-down adoption. So in 2020, the European Commission was like, Signal is the only app we suggest our members use. And within that sort of self-contained environment, everyone is using it, and suddenly like everyone at your workplace can use it, or everyone in the government uses it. So, what we do is try to be ready for those moments. We can't manufacture them, but we can make sure good information about why Signal is the gold standard, is, by far the most trustworthy option out there, and is just like, frankly, a very much classier choice than any of the others, is like available in print or on media.
And extremely it's not like going on Mastodon or one of these things that are so complicated. But it's just you download the app, phone number in, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, it's just a gorgeous, clean app. We're not shoving any weird AI into it. We're not trying to make you like buy our ads. It's just like, it's classy.
Yeah. Like, but is there, and let me tag it, sorry, this is one final thing after this. Is it a prosecutable offense, for instance, to have Signal on your phone in, say, Russia or Iran?
There are places where the
possession of the software.
I actually don't know the answer to that. There are places where like we know people have been questioned or treated as suspicious because of that, whether that's because of a legal code or just like, the rule of law is thin and they suspect everyone. I don't have a clear answer. But
if you're on an iPhone in Russia, by the way, I mean, whereas, an Android, you can get APK files and like sideload them easily. Yeah. Everything has to go through the App Store. I presume Signal is not available on the App Store in Russia, right?
I don't know about Russia. I do know that they pulled it from China about a year ago. Yeah. So Apple, we were available in the App Store, but there were, we were blocked in other ways in China. So, and then we were eliminated from the App Store along with WhatsApp.
Did you have a negotiation with them about that?
No,
with Apple.
No,
they just
Apple. Let's be clear. That is
big country for them.
Big country for them. Yeah, and like they own the App Store, we don't. Yeah. Right, and that's the dynamic there. So we,
There's not an apology, say, we have to do this, we have to abide by local law.
No, I didn't. Tim didn't send me like a box of macarons and a
bouquet. You should do that, by the way. It's just a nice gesture. Meredith Whittaker, thank you so much for this. It's one of those conversations that could continue for another 3 hours, but we all have other things to do. Cool. But you live in the city, so let's do it again.
Yeah, let's hang out.
The rest of you at the Moynihan Report, or is it at Moynihan Report? I never even know. On YouTube, subscribe, and we will see you again on Tuesday or Thursday.
Is there, like, this is so unorthodox, but there was like a part of that labor answer that I feel like I wanted to give, and then we like got sort of winding into the conversation. So this idea that all jobs are going to be eliminated, I was sort of making the case that what we're talking about is like a degradation and not necessarily an elimination, and that degradation sort of has its legacy and sort of the speed up and other things. But I think we're also seeing that with AI, because there's an entire world of labor that has been created to enable these AI systems, the data labelers, the like remote call center operators who are the ones who have to sort of like steer the AI. It's kind of like a sleep dealer universe that we live in. You had this humanoid cleaning robot that was previewed a couple weeks ago as like, oh, you now have a Jetsons butler in your home. It turns out like low paid workers, I think in Honduras, are paid to stare at the screen through the eyes of the robot and like steer it, right? And so what I think we are doing.
That's amazing.
I know.
Yeah,
Sleep
yeah.
Dealer. You should watch it. Anyway, what we're doing, I think, is creating this kind of like a displacement of labor, this invisibilization of labor that often is sort of, remote,
Yeah.
located in the global south, not paid very much. And there's no evidence that I see that will ever be like eliminated, right? There, you know, someone needs to be the sort of human buffer zone to be like, oh yeah, your training data distribution didn't include this specific contingency in this real life environment. We got to, patch that in.
Yeah.
And so, I think we need to be watchful of these claims of sort of replacement, because oftentimes it's just what we're actually talking about is like, you have a shittier job. So, okay, you were writing a TV show and you were a writer and you were paid full time and you got insurance. Well, now you're going to be called an AI editor and you have to log into a gig work app and you're not paid as much and you get an AI script and basically you're a script fixer on that. But nonetheless, you're still kind of doing the same job. We've just rearranged the structure of your employment such that somehow you're not able to command the type of remuneration you got again.
Sure.
So that...
Yeah, and I think of that as like going from vinyl to CDs. In now, what do people buy now? Nobody buys CDs, they buy vinyl. Is that if you're making TV shows that are scripted by AI, there's a great market opportunity for people to say the vinyl thing. We have real writers. And this is different because it has, but it's also the thing, I mean, you've looked at this stuff going back into history and you can find people, and, I grew up in a union family. I understand the purpose of all this stuff, but you can find people in organized labor saying no tractors, one tractor to sow a field, that's 25 jobs we're losing. And that worked itself out. But there's a lot of examples of technological innovation, and almost everyone of their people trying to stop it because it's going to eliminate jobs. And there's displacement of jobs and people go other places.
I mean, there is that. Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes what is actually a struggle over like, cool, we got tractors, so let's get a half day of work for the same pay. Yeah. Like, why don't we get some of the benefit of that tractor innovation that our tax dollars subsidize or whatever it is, instead of it just going to the person who owns the farm that we work on. Yeah. Like, the debate is over
analogy,
like who gets to benefit from these innovations. Yeah. And then those get like kind of mischaracterized often as like, well, they're against progress. And it's like, no, they're against the sort of way that the spoils of progress are being allocated. Yeah. But it's it's a different debate. But thank you for indulging me, because I wanted to make sure that point got in there. That
100%. Yeah. Absolutely. Cut that in, guys. That's
cool. Thank you.
Or have the robots do it. I don't know if you guys still work here. Did you guys leave during this?
Yeah.
Did we replace you?
Honduras, are you there? Can you cut that? Yeah.